If you're thinking about getting an MFA in creative writing, I understand the temptation. I struggled with this decision for years. Ultimately, I didn't get one. It worked out because I found an agent and I saw my novels published without having gotten an MFA. Today, I'm going to share with you why I didn't end up going to get my MFA. So let's go. Like many writers I know, I wanted to be a writer since I was really young. For me, it was 7th grade. My 7th grade English teacher, Miss Chansey, inspired me to want to be an author. So if you're out there, Miss Chansey, I still love you. I took a slight detour and wound up in law school, so that happened. But once I realized my mistake and I left law to be a writer, I wasn't sure how to go about it. I was serious about it, but I didn't know if being serious about it meant I needed to get an MFA. On one hand, going for my MFA truly sounded like a dream. I loved the idea of it. Being back in school again, going to classes for something I loved so much, writing. It sounded like a dream. On the other, it felt pretty impractical given my life circumstances, and I mean like really impractical. And this is coming from someone who had just quit her first ever law job after only 7 months. So, I was willing to make bold choices, but I still had over $100,000 in student loan debt from law school. I was living paycheck to paycheck on my tutoring salary. I was turning 30 in a few months. Was I really gonna go back to a full-time graduate program? Take out maybe another 6 figures in student loans, unless I could get into a fully funded program, which I knew was really rare and very unlikely, and then still go back to school again like for years. I would graduate at that point with over $200,000 of debt. It just seemed rash. Still, I was committed to becoming a published author, and I might have done it. I might have actually gone to get my MFA if I really believed it was the right thing that was going to launch my writing career. But a few things gave me pause, a few things other than money. I should say here that I actually did apply more than once, and I was offered a spot at 2 different places 2 different times. Once to a school that cost less, that I was less excited about, and once to a school that I was really excited about that cost a lot more. So why ultimately didn't I go? Well, I have 3 reasons that I want to share with you today. The first is that I had made a new writer friend at a writing residency, and she happened to have gotten her MFA years earlier from what was then ranked as the best MFA creative writing program in the country. It was fully funded. She hadn't paid a dime, and she was very clear with me as we sat talking at this writing residency that it had destroyed her creatively. She said she hadn't written a word for years afterward. It had taken all of the joy out of writing for her. And now, by the time I was meeting her about a decade later, she was just starting to write again. This story was, of course, very disturbing to me. I really liked this woman as a person, and as a writer, I thought she was brilliant. So if she could be so derailed by an MFA program, and one that was supposed to be the very best one, I was nervous what might happen to me in an MFA program. The second reason is that as the years passed, I had more and more friends who were getting their MFAs. And it was really strange to notice that even as they got them and even as they graduated with these degrees, we all still seemed to be in the same place. They hadn't finished their novels either. They also didn't seem to know how to get a literary agent and didn't have literary agents. And they also still had a lot of self-doubt. They also had a lot of debt. It was impossible to look at the situation and go, okay, so what did it gain them? I don't mean to be dismissive, truly. I'm sure that they could list all kinds of benefits from their programs, like how it made them better writers and the relationships they formed. But just looking at these concrete facts, that they didn't finish having written a book and they didn't learn how to get a literary agent or get a literary agent, and they were still daunted by self-doubt, those seemed relevant. It was especially weird when we would have these conversations where I seemed to know more about getting a literary agent than they did. That planted a pretty big seed of doubt in my head as well. Okay, and the third reason, and this is gonna sound maybe kind of harsh, but when I read people's work when they graduated from MFA programs, I started to notice that it all sounded kind of alike. Like It had the same sort of disenchanted, disengaged protagonist who's floating through life, the same sparse writing, the same sparing sentences. It felt almost like someone would go into the MFA machine and come out the other side writing just like everyone else who went into the MFA machine. And it didn't feel like fun writing. I didn't love these books. I should say this, I'm not talking about people I know personally. I'm talking about strangers. These books didn't want to make me keep reading. I felt like I was supposed to find them brilliant, but I didn't. I didn't love them. I was trying to plot a novel myself, and I knew how hard it was. I was most impressed by writers who could plot, and I was finding that often these books didn't have plots at all. There were exceptions, of course. My best friend and his husband both got MFAs and both kept their brilliant, individual, unique voices throughout their MFA programs and still wrote in them afterward. But they seemed to kind of be more the exception than the rule when I looked around and I looked at the books that were coming out by MFA graduates. In the end, I decided that the cost and risk combined didn't make it worth it to me. And luckily, I don't regret that decision because ultimately I did finish my novel and land an agent who shortly after sold my book and then my next 2 books. It's such a personal decision whether to get your MFA or not. I will say that if the reasons I've listed in this episode resonate with you, I would love for you to check out the program I run, the Book Incubator. It's an MFA alternative that I created after going through all of this that I've just shared with you. If you're the kind of person who thinks you might thrive in an MFA program like I was, then you're the kind of person who I think would thrive in the Book Incubator. You can learn more at the link below this video, so check it out.